Hello, I'm Felton Zimmerman. I'm the inventor and designer of the Mitigator. This is the world's first variable pivoting saddle, where the saddle actually changes its orientation relative to its frame, actually mimicking ergonomically the rider's movements that he would typically position himself over the frame under different trail conditions, such as sprinting, uphills, climbs, different obstacles, and downhills. All these conditions require the rider to maneuver in different positions over the bike. And this is the neutral position. This is the position actually where a professional technician would actually fit you in this position. He would take your measurements, he would adjust your saddle height and you know, everything that corresponds to the right measurements to the rider. And from this position is where everything else, when you're getting into your sprinting position or your downhill position, it automatically adjusts to the fitting. This is the most important position because you're ready for anything. It's sudden climbs. If you climb suddenly, it'll get into a climbing position effortlessly. A downhill position, you know, again, it'll go downward, where your center of gravity will actually shift back and lowering the saddle, and it'll adjust the bicycle geometry to actually conform to a downhill riding. When the rider's in the neutral position, the rider is also in a self-leveling mode. And what that means is, no matter how irregular the ground may be, the saddle will conform to the rider's needs. So typically, the rider might be off his saddle, hovering over these different bumps and stuff, and letting the bike absorb up and down all these bumps. And his legs would actually be absorbing most of these irregularities. So you would see the saddle underneath him actually bobbing up and down. So in this case, for the Mitigator, as he stays seated, what it'll do is it'll actually absorb all these irregularities and at the same time provide a constant pressure on the bottom of the rider. So the main idea is that it keeps the rider's mass as even and level over these rough terrain and continuously providing a support for the rider. It actually conserves the rider a lot more energy. When I push down on the pedals, you'll see how plushy it feels and how it rides. And actually it's a real plush ride going over stumps and rocks and stuff like that you can actually go over, and the saddle will absorb and maintain the rider's mass level over these obstacles. And it does a fantastic job of absorbing these type of bumps. Alright, so typically on a mountain bike, the rider has to get up off of his saddle and lean forward if he wants to sprint or if he wants to make a climb. And generally he lifts off the saddle about a couple of inches and he comes forward about 4 or 5 inches. This is counterproductive to the overall efficiency of the bike because he's actually raising his mass higher over the bike, which causes a lot more instability. As soon as you're off the saddle, your whole overall efficiency deteriorates dramatically. You lose a lot of traction capability and for that matter, control. And you'll notice this on hard sprints and takeoffs, where the rider is actually gyrating the bicycle back and forth. You'll see the rear wheel is fishtailing behind him, and it's spitting up dirt. And this is all due because the rider's off the saddle. In this case, in the Mitigator, what happens here is that it mimics ergonomically the rider's position. So when the rider gets into a sprinting position, the saddle follows and it actually positions him in a more ergonomic, friendly position over the bike, giving him more support, more traction, and more efficiency. The actual angle of the saddle is actually a perfect angle for the rider, that as he's pedaling forward, he's actually feeling the support. It's actually brought closer to where he's actually needing to be, and the amount of rigidity and control that you feel is really phenomenal. You'd have to experience to really appreciate it. In this position, it actually locks out the suspension. So in this position, in this neutral position, the suspension is very plushy. But in the sprinting position, it actually becomes very stiff. So that's exactly the way you want this, is to be stiff in sprinting positions and in climbs. And when you're riding through the trails, you want the suspension to be very plushy and compliant with the uneven surface. So once the rider reaches a certain speed and momentum, what happens then is that your saddle will actually fall back naturally and into a neutral position. In the climbing position, this is where this bike really outshines more than any other bike out there. And the reason why is because as the rider enters into a climb, it ergonomically changes and it actually helps the rider get into this climbing position. And you'll feel underneath you the saddle changing because of the amount of torque you're needing to apply and because of you pulling up on the handlebars as well. Typically on a conventional mountain bike, the rider would have to lift himself off the saddle and sacrifice a tremendous amount of traction and efficiency. On the Mitigator, the opposite is true. Not only does the rider stay seated the whole time, being able to maintain perfect traction, but his overall efficiency has nearly doubled, and which equates to more riding time and less rest time. In the downhill position, unlike conventional mountain bikes, the rider can stay seated on most downhills and drops. This is because the saddle is totally isolated from the rear wheel suspension activities.